A very good evening and good morning as well for the people in different time zones. We are in session number 9 today, and we are going to cover the topics of the chapter called functions. And as always, let's do a quick brush up of what we have learned in the last session, and then we'll start off with the today's session. So in session number 8, we basically completed the conditions and loops chapter, wherein we understood the for loop very importantly, and the while loop. And along with learning for loop and while loop, we have also taken the opportunity to learn, uh, you know, the range as well as sleep. These are the two important functions in any of the loops. And we know range is something that we use in case if you want to iterate over fixed number of turns or iterations. If you want to basically run a program in a loop for fixed number of iterations, you choose range, or also you can directly pass in the list. And if you want to run a program in a fixed number of length as the list, definitely you can pass in list as well. In case not, then you can use range as one of the functions to generate those sequences. And we have also seen range generates the sequence of numbers as you want it. In case by default, if you just say range of 5, it basically generates the numbers from 0 to 4. In case if you want to start with any other number, not 0, you can specify range of 2, 5. So it will start with 2, 3, 4, right? And then you can also say if you don't want to hop by one number, increment by one number for each element. If you want to hop it by two numbers, you can definitely say, range 1, 10, 2, so that it starts with 1 and hops by every two numbers. Okay, so that's what range is. And sleep we basically used to halt the program for certain duration of time, and it's basically in seconds. Okay, so that's where we have seen sleep is very useful for. And then coming back to the loops, for loop is again, if you have a fixed number of loops to iterate over the numbers, we see the for loop, and we can have nested for loops. And wherein while loop comes into the picture, where you do not know well in advance how many number of iterations you will have to run a loop. In that cases, while loop is more beneficial, and breaking up your iteration or a loop, if it is dependent on any other variable value, then even then the while loop is the best one for you to choose. Okay, so that is where we have learned while loop and for loop. And as we concluded the session yesterday, we have also seen inside a while loop how to write a for loop, inside the for loop an if loop. Okay, so you can mix and play now from everything that we have learned until session number 8. We have learned data types, variables, we have learned data structures, we have learned conditions and loops. Now you can mix and do anything that you get on your head and try if that works or not. Right? So you can very well do that from now, and that is when you practice a lot. That is a real practice actually. You will get to know a lot of things, lot of unknowns, which you will try to get answers yourself. Right? That is the best learning ever. All right. Having said that, let's see, this session basically covers up functions. So there are a lot of types of functions that you have to a little worry about, but it's easy to understand. And you know what is a function already. Why am I telling this? So the reason why I'm telling this is we have default functions already available in the Python, right? So what is the default function? I'm sure we have used something called len. I'm sure we have used something called input, right? So all of these are functions. So what is a function? Let me define a function first of all. A function is a fixed or a step of commands in a program. So function is a group of commands. To put it in a very, very layman statement, probably you not see this definition in the outside, but I'm keeping it very layman so that you understand it better. Function is group of commands, right? A function can take inputs and run that group of commands, or it can also run the group of commands without taking the input. Now, one of the important property of a function is to basically return a value. Okay, so first important property of a function is a group of commands to execute. Now, that group of commands that you want to execute can take an external inputs and run the group of commands, or without the inputs also it can run the group of commands. Now, every function will return a value, and you have to write a function to return a value. So what is returning a value? Let me explain that with the help of default functions that we have already. Okay. So for example, length. Len is a function, right? So I'm giving some input as a list to the length as a function. What it does is it takes this as an input. There is a program that somebody has written for the function called len. What does it do? It will take the elements of the list here and it will count them as a counter. 1, 2, 3, 4. So my list has got 4 elements. So the return value of a function is 4. So when I execute this, what is the return value? 4. So what is the input to this length? It is 1, 2, 3, 4. As I told you, a function can take an input and throw an output. Output is called returning a value. Returning a value is a primary property of a function. Now, who wrote what code behind this len? If you are using a Windows machine, please press Control on your keyboard, or I have command on my keyboard as it is iMac. As I hover on length, there is a symbol that I can click on, the hand symbol. If you click on this, it will take you to a place where somebody coded the length function. Okay, and this is how they coded. I'll let you know, do not worry much about this, but length is a function that has been somebody built in already. That's the reason it is under built-ins.py. Very quickly close this up. Don't change anything inside this function. Similarly, somebody has coded already for computing minimum value for a given list. If I click this, again you are into a different function where somebody has developed this variable, or it is called a function. Okay, so on and so forth. So what is the function definition? Function is set of program commands that you can execute. Functions can take an input and it will throw an output. Okay, so why did I say that functions need not take any input? For example, I say import, okay, from date time package, import date time. Okay, and now after that I say date time dot now. So when I execute this now as a function, now doesn't basically take any input, right? Now doesn't take any input, but what happens here? I'm sorry, did I again face an issue here? Yes, I'm again seeing an issue. So let me kill this. It's not killing. Oh my god. So let me kill this quickly. This Python, I just saw that. PID is 656, terminal. It is kill -9 656. Okay, so I've killed it. So let me rerun. So this command I'm going to install, and this one, see here, this is a function inside this package called datetime, but this now function doesn't need any input, but still it has generated an output for you. That's the reason I say there are types of functions. There are few functions which inputs are mandatory. Without giving an input, it doesn't work. For example, without giving anything like this, it cannot tell you the minimum value in the list is 1. This will tell you the maximum value in this list is 4, right? If you give any other list into maximum, for example, 10, 19, 30, 40, 50, what is the maximum value in this complete list? 50. Without giving any input, there is no value of this function at all, right? Similarly, input. You can pass in some input to this input function, or you need not. If I execute exactly like this, it will ask you what is the input. You just pass it. Nothing happens. But there is an output called 20. But I can also write input like this, right? Please input some number. Now this input function is taking some external inputs into the program, and it is executing this piece, and as and when somebody types something, it gives that as an output. So every function will throw an output, and that is called returning a value. That's the definition of a function. We have seen length, we have seen dictionary. In case if you have a JSON format from external sources, you wanted to convert as a dictionary, you have to use dict as a function. It will convert that for you. And absolute, I think if you can recollect mathematics that you have learned in the past, absolute is nothing but modulator operator. So if there is a negative value, it will return a positive value. If there is a positive value, it's the same value, right? In your mathematics, you must have seen mod as an operator or absolute value. It is called one and the same. So all of these are some predefined functions which are available when you install Python by default. Now, what is very interesting for us is if you have a set of things, you want to execute them again and again and again throughout the rest of your code, you can define that function on your own so that you code it only once but use it n number of times. For example, I wanted to compute a plus b whole square. So what did I do? I basically created a function called orskill. Now, how do I create a function? What is the syntax? If you want to create a function inside Python, you should say def. Def is like define. After def, you give a space and you write the function name. So I'm saying my function name is orskill underscore abs square. I'm saying this function needs two inputs. One is called a, another one is called b. That's how I'm creating this function. Now, whenever somebody gives two inputs to this function, what is that I have to compute? Inside this function, create a variable called y, which is a square. So if you give double star or double asterisk inside Python, that means square of it, right? If I say 3, it is power a to the power 3. If I say 4, a to the power 4. Okay. Now again I say b power in the sense double asterisk and then 2. That is nothing but b square plus 2 into a into b. This is calculus, right? If I want to compute a plus b whole square, a square plus b square plus 2ab. This is a formula. And this is not available by default in your Python. So I'm trying to create my own function. Okay. And what am I saying? The value is inside my y. Now I would say return y. So return y is nothing but after you give inputs to this function, the output is given to you as a y variable. That is what will come out of the function. Okay. That's it. So any function can end with a return statement because function should throw the output. Okay. So now I'm creating this function. Select all of these lines in one go and create this function. This function is available for you to now utilize. Now let's see what does it say. I say orskill b square and I wanted to compute 2 plus 3 whole square. See, 2 plus 3 whole square is 25. 2 square is 4, 3 square is 9 plus 2 into 3. How much it is? 12. Okay. 4 plus 9 plus 12 is 25. That's it. Now, why should I basically create this? For example, in line number 19, I have used this function. I got certain output. In line number 25 also, if I wanted to execute the same command, and in line number 30 also, I wanted to execute the same set of commands, that is when creating user-defined functions makes more sense. So from the definition of function, now we went into purpose of creating a function. So when do you actually create a function? If you have a group of commands that you wanted to execute more number of times in your program going forward, then you create a function. If there are a group of commands you wanted to execute only once, there is no point in creating a function. Now, if I have to compute something, 4 plus 5 whole square. See, I only wrote the formula once. It will do the job for me and it will keep giving me the value of y inside the variable. But remember one thing, any variables that you are creating inside the function are not available outside the function. What does it mean? If I say print of y here, it throws an error. There is no variable called y. But y is a variable which we have defined inside the function. So the scope of that variable is only inside the function. You cannot use it outside the function. Okay. So whatever I said 2, 3, whenever I passed in this syntax, a automatically became 2, b automatically became 3, and that value is passed inside the variable as 2 square plus 3 square plus 2 into 3. All of this magic happened inside automatically. So that's the reason it is very easy to code in Python. That's why it has become so famous as well. And in the next command, right, a has become 4, b has become 5, and inside that variable, inside that function, it is 4 square plus 5 square plus 2 into 4 into 5. As simple as that. Now if you ask me, will I also have a variable outside the function? No. Any variables that are passing as inputs to the function and any variables that are defined inside the function are only scoped for the existence inside the function only. In case, if you want this variable to be available outside the function as well, you have to rewrite this function differently. What is that you have to use? Inside the function, you have to just say, whatever y variable that I'm going to create, it is a global variable. So global variable is nothing but the variable y will be available outside the function as well. Now let me show you what happens now if I'm executing. I have to replace this function first. And after replacing, I am executing this. I have a value called 25, the same thing as before. Now if I say print of y, let's see, the value is 24. Now by default, the variables inside the function are within the function. In case if you want that variables outside the function also to be visible, then you will have to specify it specially as global variable. Alright. So this is about user-defined functions and the purpose of creating a function and how to utilize the function and run it for multiple purposes. Alright. Now, whenever you say this function, if you want this 25 to be assigned to another variable, you can absolutely do that. If I say b is equals to r skill absolute square, a plus b whole square, this one. Now if I say print of b value will be 25. That's it. This execution result is going into the variable called b. This is user-defined function. Okay. Now comes another important section of the function called lambda functions. Lambda functions has become very, very famous in today's world because these are anonymous functions. What do I mean by anonymous functions? In case if you have one set of program or one single line of program, not too complex. If it is a complex set of programs you wanted to execute again and again, you can choose to create user-defined functions like this. I have only created one step of line code here. You can write another transformations also. Z is equals to y to the power of, then convert into y to the power of 3, then return z. Then the outcome will be completely different, right? So you can choose, you can write n number of lines inside that, function. But if you have a very simple one-liner code of function, you need not create this function on the fly. You need not create a user-defined function, but because that becomes an object inside the memory. Instead, you can use anonymous functions called lambda. And how do I create anonymous functions? What is the definition of it? After executing this line, okay, basically lambdas are not majorly utilized with this syntax, but because I have to explain how the lambda functions behave, I'm creating it into another variable. So the way that you create the difference between this one and this one is, I say lambda a comma b colon. That means lambda function takes inputs a comma b. After that, inside that function, what does it do? A square plus b square plus 2ab. Automatically, what does it do? It will return the output of this complete command. Okay. So now what am I doing? I'm basically creating this lambda function. Earlier I created user-defined function. This is lambda function. Now I'm saying r skill absolute square, a plus b whole square, lambda of 2 comma 3. It will also throw me the same 25 value as before. Now if I scroll down, 4 comma 5 is 81, right? Let's pass in the same input to this a plus b whole square lambda function, 4 comma 5. It is the same thing, 81. But if you have a single liner job and it is only once, okay? And that once, if you want to execute into n number of elements, then lambda function comes into the picture. But as of now, just think lambda is also a function, but it is anonymous. What is anonymous? After executing or after utilizing this lambda function, it will not exist. But I have forced it to be created as a variable. That's the reason it will exist now. But if I don't force it to be part of a variable and I only execute it on the fly, it will not exist. That's the reason Lambda functions are mostly referred as, anonymous functions. I'll explain you what is that, why is it called anonymous in the next topic, that is map and filter. Okay. With the help of map and filter, probably it will be little better using lambdas versus user defined functions. Okay. See, I see somebody is got unmuted. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Okay. Now, when do I use map as a function? Map is a predefined utility that you have inside your Python. But when do I use it? Okay. So the point when I use this one as map as a function is when I have list of elements, and for each element I have to execute a function and return a value. What happens if you don't know about map operator? How do you do it? So for example, for every value inside my list, I have to multiply it with 2 value and return the value. I think I have done this in the for loops in the last session. So how do I do it? I'll say y is equals to 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I say, I'll create an empty one called x is equals to empty. Then I would say for I in y variable, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, x should be added with the new value called I into 2, right? That is nothing but 1 into 2. Again, it will add another for loop will go into another loop. It becomes 2 into 2. For loop goes into another loop. 3 into 2. Again, it goes into another loop. 4 into 2. So my x variable will be 2, 4, 6, 8. Right? So let me execute this and see the value of x. This is what we have seen in the last sessions, right? Now, to run one particular operation of mathematical operation, you had to do this much of coding. You have to run in an iteration. Now that feasibility is given to you by default in the Python as map operator. Okay, so sorry, and then what we have is my screen hang to everybody? I'm sorry, I think I just paused it. I'm sorry, yeah. Can you guys see my screen now? I'm selecting something for you. Cool, thank you. All right, so now if I have to make my life easy, I don't want to write a for loop for each element inside the list. See, what did I do? I basically return this multiplication operator that I have in line number 56 in a function. Function name is __multiple. Inside this, you have to return whatever is the input, multiply it with 2 and return that value. Now, what did I do? Using the map operator, I said this function, you have to iterate over each of these elements. Right? That's the one. Is somebody asking me something to explain again? You can unmute and tell me, what to explain again, please. I can explain. Okay. Sure. Okay. All right, then I'll repeat this stuff. So just for you guys, again, I'm repeating this. So for example, I have a list called y, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. I have to basically multiply each element of this list with number 2 and then return that into a different list. If I have this as a requirement, how did we do in the last session using for loops? I created this variable first, then I created an empty list, and then I started a for loop. For I in y, that means I becomes 1 in the first iteration. What happens here? I'm adding the current to the current existing empty list. I'm adding 1 into 2. So 2 will become the first element. In the second iteration, I value is 2 because the second element here is 2. And 2 into 2 becomes 4. 4 will get added to the existing list. It is 2, 4 now. Now it goes into the third iteration. 3 into 2 is 6. So 2 comma 4 comma 6, and then in the fourth iteration 4 into 2 is 8, 2 comma 4 comma 6 comma 8. That's how we solve that problem using for loop. In case if I have a certain mathematical operation to be executed to each of the element of a list, right? So I did this operator and I printed this x value. You see the output here. Now the job of you executing one set of commands over each element of a list, to do that possible, you have to write a for loop like this. But instead, map operator makes it very easy. So how is it possible here? I'm creating first of all one function which takes an input one value and it returns that value into 2. So in my case, if I pass 1 as an input, 2 is my output. If I pass 10 as an input, 20 is my output. If I pass 30 as an input, 60 is my output. Okay. Now what am I saying is I'm creating a map object that is nothing but using this function. You have to iterate all the elements that you see in the list, right? You have to, for each of the element that you see in the list, you have to execute this function. That's what I said. So that means this x value will become as an input for each of this element. Now if I create this, I'm creating a map object. I'm sorry, I have to create this function first. Then I create this. See here what happened. There is an object called map object got created for you. And if I have to execute this map object, the way that you say is execute this map object, return me the list of elements. You see here 2 comma 4 comma 6 comma 8. It is exactly same as the value x, but you need not write a for loop to iterate over each element of a list. It is made available for you in the form of map operator. Okay, you might ask me, this is fine if I have two numbers to pass in, like a comma b, right? A plus b whole square. How do I use map operator for a group of elements? See, it's exactly the same thing. If your definition or a user defined function has got two inputs, here in the map function you have to expect two elements to pass in. Instead of one element, you have to pass two elements. When you pass in this, what exactly it is happening is 1 plus 1 whole square, it will compute and it will give the output. 2 comma 2 whole square, 2 plus 2 whole square, it will compute and it will give you. 3 plus 3 whole square, it will compute and it will give you. 4 comma 4 whole square, it will compute and it will give you. So each of the element output is the value of the output element. See here, 1 plus 1 whole square is 4. Yeah, 2 plus 2 whole square is 16 because 4 square is 16, right? And so on and so forth. 3 comma 3 whole square is this, 4 comma 4 whole square is that. See, as simple as that. If you have two inputs of this function, you have to pass two variables. If you don't have that, then it will throw an error because this is expecting two inputs, right? You have to pass in two variables here. Cool. And if you have to make it possible using the functions, right? Instead of this function, if you have to run a for loop to this, you have to write two for loops, a nested for loop. See how difficult it is going to be? You have to pass in one, then you have to go another for loop and you take one. Or you can say for loop with one variable and for the same position, other variables value. You can write as complex as possible. It need not be nested for loops. You can write a simple for loop also. But you have to program at least 3 to 4 lines. But here you create one, what is the actual action to be taken? And then you can use map operator. It will make sure that each of these elements are executed inside that function and it is returned in the form of a list. Now, here comes the magic of Lambda. That is where Lambda is mostly used. Now on the fly, I wanted to create the values of these a plus b whole square, but I don't want to make any of these functions created because this is anonymous. After this line, I don't want to use this at all anywhere inside my code. But I wanted this to be executed for each element inside the function once, and that is the lifetime of that job. That is when Lambda functions or the anonymous functions comes into the play. Now the same thing, how did I code? I said Oracle underscore map 3 is equals to, I'm writing a Lambda function which is exactly below this line, but I'm making you guys comfortable with. Lambda, it takes a value, two values, x comma y, then say colon. And what is the operation for these inputs? X square plus y square plus 2 into x into y. And what are the x variables and y variables? You have to now pass them, right? Just say comma. X value is 1, 2, 3, 4, and y value is 1, 2, 3, 4. So what it does, lambda of 1 comma 1, lambda of 2 comma 2, lambda of 3 comma 3, so on and so forth, it will execute like that. So in this case, I'm just doing this, and I would just say command return. Now I would say list. It is exactly the same output as using a define function. Now after this line, this particular operation, if you don't want it anywhere else, that is where the life of lambda is exhausted. That's why lambda functions are anonymous. On the fly, you can get a function, you can run on n number of elements, and after that line, the life of the lambda function is gone. But if you create a function like this, I can even use it now. It will be there until my complete Python kernel is closed. So it is a most persistent function, right? So now see 3 comma 3 still there. But anonymous function, no. After this line of code, it is gone. Okay, that is where the lambda functions come into the play. And as lambda functions are more efficient way of coding. In case if you have a function or a simple code or simple operations to be performed in the complete set of list only once, lambda functions will come into the play. Now map is very, very useful in case if you have a function or a group of commands to be executed in n number of elements in a list in one single go. You need not write a for loop to do that. You can just write a map operator. Now to help this, there is another operator called filter. What does it do? As the name says, instead of map, if you are using filter, what we are saying is, if for a given input, if the remainder is 0, only those inputs you throw me as an output. So it is exactly like, in case if you guys are comfortable with SQL programming language, it is like a where clause. Okay, you give where something is equals to something, only for the rows for which the where condition falls true, you see the output. Right? So what I'm saying, I'm creating a list called this. In all of this list, again, I'm saying filter, this is the lambda, and apply this lambda for this list. So it will say 1 divided by 2. What is the remainder? It is not 0. So it will not be part of the output. 2 divided by 2. Yes, the remainder is 0. So yes. So percentile is nothing but remainder. After the division operation, what is the remainder? Right? 3 divided by 2. The remainder is 1. So it will not be part of the output. 4 divided by 2. The remainder is 0. Yes, it will be part of the output. 5 divided by 2, the remainder is 1. It will not be part of the output because I said filter operation. Now if I execute this and I say list, see the output is only 2 comma 4 because only for the element 2 and 4 the remainder is 0. So in case if you have a specific filtering operations and also it has to apply that filter operations inside the elements in one single go, filter is the job that you have to choose. Okay. So what did we cover today? What are the default? I think I'm trying to stop here because I have nested functions coming up and iterators, regular expressions. I have written all of this for you today, but I think we are good with this. I wanted you guys to practice with this stuff over the weekend, and then we can start with nested functions, and it becomes easier for the further topics of this chapter as well. So again, just to summarize what we did, we know what are the default functions. We have defined what is a function. May or may not take an input, but it will definitely throw an output. And inside the function, there would be a set of commands or programs to execute. That's the definition of function. And we have created our own functions also. A very simple example that I took, a plus b whole square. Right? 2 variables that you give as an input. You can create, okay, one thing that I did not do is you can create a function without an input also, right? How do you create? Oracle underscore func, there is nothing. Instead of a, b, you don't specify anything. That's it. It would say print I'm writing a print command, that's it. It's an empty function. So whenever I execute this function, rskill underscore function, so first of all I have to execute, make sure it is there inside my memory, and I execute it. You see, it's an empty function. So there can be functions with inputs, without inputs, but functions will always return something. And you can specify what to return in case if you have set of lines in it. And another thing that we have learned is a variable inside the function, until unless you specify it as global, it is not accessible outside the function. Okay, and then we have seen what is lambda functions, and lambda functions are by default called as anonymous functions. And in case if you specify the lambda functions to a variable, it is no more anonymous function. It is almost same as the user defined functions that we have seen above. And it's exactly the same, but it's a very simple one-liner code that you can write for a lambda function. So a comma b is exactly like input that you define, like here, this syntax, and say colon, and you say what is that operation that you want to perform on the inputs. And then you execute this, you will get the same output, a plus b whole square. And to help you running a set of commands over the list of elements, you have map and filter as a savior, right? So for each of the element, if you have certain function to execute, map is the operator that you can choose. And if for each of the element, you want to execute a program, but you also wanted to filter it out based on certain condition, yes, filter is a savior. And in both the cases, you can use user-defined functions or lambda functions also. Okay, but for the filter, I have only shown you lambda operations. You can also try using user-defined functions as an exercise for yourself. Okay, so coming back to the topics that we have covered today. So let me show it up here. So inside the functions, we have dealt with default functions, user-defined functions, lambda, and map reduce. This is where I'm trying to pause myself for today, and we will resume in the next session on Monday. So on this note, in case if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Any questions? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. No questions? Sorry, somebody. Alright, I just see a chat. If somebody can speak, what if I want to pass dynamic inputs to Lambda? Yeah, if the dynamic inputs is something that you have here, right? So the dynamic inputs for the Lambda is nothing but, a comma b. It can be anything. You can pass that a comma b in the form of a list here. And this list, you need not fix it. You can create a variable. You can create a variable of list that comes from external values, like a user input. And you can pass that inside this Lambda also, no problem. The inputs are always dynamic, but only the function is anonymous, which means it doesn't exist inside the kernel at all. It will execute on the fly for that particular moment and it will vanish. That's it. That's Lambda. Hope I have answered your question. Okay, any other questions? No? Okay, I think this way, I think the classes are a little dry. I would basically encourage you guys to keep asking me a lot of questions because somehow I feel that I'm not sure if you guys are getting it or not getting it, or am I going faster, am I going slower? I don't get into all of these answers myself if it is not interactive. I only make it one side or a monologue only for 30 minutes or 35 minutes. I wanted rest of the 10 minutes to be a little interactive so that I also understand slowly what is the need, right? And it will also help me to tune the next sessions as well, because every day I basically generate this content for you for the today's session, right? So that will help me also. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you guys. That's it for this session. We'll meet in the next session. Bye bye.